Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Risk Control and Education. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rogers, and today we're discussing the use of social media in emergency services. Joining me on the program today are Dave Bradley and Blair Tyndall. They're both industry specialists in the VFIS Risk Control and Education Department, and they're joining us today to provide some best practices to consider when using social media in your organization. Dave, Blair, I want to thank you both for joining me today, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
Great to be back, Chris.
So, Blair, I want to start the questioning off with you. How can emergency service organizations leverage social media to increase awareness of issues important to the ESO?
Well, Chris, obviously everyone knows we're in a social media world, and a lot of our ESOs need to have a presence on social media because it's pretty much how a lot of people communicate today in our world. So they can use it to positively impact the mission of the organization, talk about things that the community can benefit from, such as, smoke detectors, changing your batteries in your smoke detectors, or they can even use it for fundraising events. They can use it for other educational means, if they have an initiative, say on, fire safety, fire prevention week, escape plans, those kinds of things, even posting winter weather, alerts or summer weather alerts, or, this is really how they communicate with the community, in various ways. And they can also use it for, putting out, alerts or warnings if they have a bad accident or they have a large fire or they have an evacuation, for their fire district. And this is a way that they can do it. So it's both positive and negative. It promotes community involvement, as well as we can use it for a pretty fast and effective notification process.
Dave, I'm sure we've all known or we've heard of someone getting in a little bit of trouble for posting something on their whatever social media platform they have, and often they feel that it's their personal page, and that it's not always the case in the work world. So can you discuss privacy expectations by staff members versus the employer's interest in social media information about the ESO?
Sure, Chris. And, to go off of Blair, typically social media is seen as very, very positive. But most of the time it is, but there can be some challenges. And what folks need to keep in mind is anything you post on social media, any platform, essentially you own that information. So while your intent may be to keep that private and personal, at the end of the day, there's a good chance it's going to be shared to endless recipients. And once it's on any social media platform, you've lost control. From a leadership perspective, when you look at what your staff are posting, are they posting inappropriate, offensive, or personal communications? Because eventually they'll be brought to the attention of leadership, and then leadership has to determine should there be any action against the employee who authored the content. And again, that could vary from, hey, just think about what you're posting, to potential termination depending on what they've posted.
And sometimes we have to factor in there is a freedom of speech component, but that doesn't mean that there's not consequences with that freedom of speech. So you might put what you want to on there, but that doesn't mean that the organization is going to support it and you're going to have their backing, and there might not be consequences on the back end from posting that.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the factors that should be taken into consideration when assessing an employer's interest in objecting to a social media post?
All of us meet with dozens or hundreds of emergency service organizations every year, and most of them tell us they have a process by which they do background checks, including social media platforms, to see what their staff are posting, what's out there, what the staff have been involved in the past. So an employer has an interest in those activities, both while they're on the clock, but while they're also off the clock. From an on the clock standpoint, when are they on social media? Is it at the beginning of a shift when rig check should be getting done or other duties as assigned should be done? you go to what is being posted. Are staff posting pictures of emergency service scenes to which they responded? And could those posts be interpreted as offensive or uncaring? Imagine a family member that views a fire or vehicle collision on social media before they're made aware of it by another family member. And we've seen this in the industry across fire, EMS, and law enforcement. Are they posting pictures of patients? And we hear all the time, well, the media is allowed to do it. Well, the media is a different animal. When you're in the role of law enforcement, fire, EMS, your goal is to care for those people, and there should be a pretty good written policy that strongly identifies that is not an allowable process. When off duty, and again, Chris, back to your point, people think I'm off duty. Anything I post is my own. But are they posting to social media that directly ties them back to business-related activities of their emergency service organization? Are they harming personal or professional reputations? And from an in-station standpoint, looking at business-related information, are staff utilizing personal devices that lack safeguards installed on organizational devices? So you're in your station. There's lots of controls on the computers you use, on what things can be searched for and things like that. Yet they're on their personal devices. Are they looking at sensitive or confidential information? Are they releasing information potentially because there aren't safeguards about the organization's operations, personnel, or finances?
So, Blair, I want to follow up with you. What topics should be included in policies to assure leadership and staff understand their role with regard to social media?
Well, Chris, we will, at the end of this podcast, talk about some recommendations that we have based in the form of what resources VFIS has developed. So we won't go into those specifics. That can certainly be viewed after the podcast in a link much more effectively than what we could cover them all here today. But you want to talk about things like having a social media policy, which we have those sample policies, as I said earlier. As well as you want to have someone that, if the ESO has a social media presence or social media account, you want to have someone that's in charge of that, someone that's an administrator that's kind of policing what is posted on the actual ESO social media website, not the personal ones, but on the official ESO, social media page. So you want to have that, as well as you want to have policies regarding what can be posted. There's financial information that may not need to be out there. There's patient information, obviously, that we don't want to release out, as Dave said earlier, tying a particular picture back to a particular person. Vehicle accidents with license plates that are shown in the picture can trace back, addresses, those kinds of things. While not, quote unquote, a HIPAA violation, it still could be construed as an invasion of privacy. And even if there's not any legal ramifications, it can really be a public relations nightmare for the ESO if that type of information is released. And again, we need to talk about policies of what's appropriate. When do employees need to be posting things? Is the public taking the stance that maybe there's too much social media posts while the employees are on duty, and maybe they're not performing their job appropriately? So there needs to be some barriers there within the organization as to when it's done, what's permitted, and who's in charge of policing or corralling, and what barriers do you have up to that. There should also be a broadly published code of conduct, how the employees should use social media. They should be made aware of that, obviously at hire, and then they should be continually reminded of that, and that this social media policy should be embedded into personnel policy as something that they know the responsibilities of it, and they're well informed up front. And then, obviously a definition of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. While we can't write a policy for every type of social media post, because in today's environment, it's, those kind of social media posts are changing so rapidly, and there's multiple platforms too. So you can't include, everything, because you'd be revising this policy, daily almost. But there needs to be a broad spectrum of Dave talked about earlier, and you did about right to privacy. That needs to be included in the policy, as well as what's appropriate to be posted. So again, policies and procedures, ESOs are famous for that, but this is another one of those where you really have to have some guardrails.
Chris, I want to add to some of Blair's comments because they're really good comments. But if we try and bring it down to really tangible. Think about where your staff are and what's permitted, and I'm not sure this can be written into policy, but think about your crew's out to lunch or dinner. If they're going to a bar, is that a good perception? They're sitting down at a restaurant that sells alcohol, or they're going to a party that's an off-duty staff member is throwing a party, and the ambulance is parked there, and clearly there's alcohol and things like that, or the fire truck's parked there. So thinking about those kind of perceptions, because without a doubt, people at those kind of events, especially at off-duty parties, are going to be taking pictures and posting things to social media, and seeing your emergency service vehicle or people in uniform hurts the reputation of the organization potentially.
Well, at the same time, social media could be used against them in that regards. People could drive by, take a picture, and say, "Look, ABC ambulance is at the bar," and it's just a picture with no context, and it just looks bad. The optics of it look bad. So it's good practice to probably stay away from those things, or get them to go, or Uber Eats, or something like that.
Yeah, and to piggyback too, Chris, on what Dave was saying, we're all, we've all been in emergency services organizations, and a lot of people are proud of being a member of a particular organization, right? It's community involvement. So we see a lot of off-duty gear. You may have a T-shirt on with your ESO's name on it, and you may think that's cool because you want to hang out and show everybody that you're a member of this great organization. But remember, you have that on as an identifying mark. So just because you're off duty doesn't mean that you might have some insignia on that's identifying you with the community organization.
Yeah, to speak to that, I had a San Antonio Fire Department shirt because I went to their museum, and I bought a shirt, and I was at a restaurant, and I didn't know it, and they gave me a discount for emergency services just because I had a shirt on from a town that I don't even live in, that I happened to buy in a museum. So people can take things and make their own conclusions without even asking, because that question was never asked of me.
That's exactly right. Yep, and that's something that we have to definitely keep in mind, is what we're wearing, what we're doing, because we're surrounded. Not only social media is driven by cameras, but we're surrounded by cameras all the time. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind as to how the public's perceiving what we do. And these, as I said earlier, these public relations risk and these optics, like this scenario, there's a couple of scenarios that we've just explained, can really be detrimental to the organization in seconds. I mean, it's not like it takes hours. It can be picture snapped and it posted to millions of people in literally in seconds. So we have to remember kind of where we're at and what we're representing as well. That goes back to the use of the social media policy.
Yeah, the wheels of public opinion certainly move very, very, very swiftly.
Absolutely.
So, Dave, I want to round out the questions with you. Blair mentioned some resources. So can you go over any resources that we may have to help people out in this area?
Sure. On responderhelp.com, there are multiple documents to help with personnel management, essentially. We've got a sample personnel manual. We've got communiques on social media, on harassment, discrimination, sexual harassment, things like that. And for VFIS clients, we have a program on social media along with several other programs on VFIS University. So lots and lots of resources, and that kind of tells you where we are in the industry. There's a lot of attention focused on this, so a lot of resources to address the potential risks.
Well, gentlemen, it was a pleasure to have you on the program. It's always a joy to talk to you, so I thank you for your time. And Blair, I thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Chris.
Dave, likewise, thank you for joining us.
Always a good time. Thanks, Chris.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guests Blair Tyndall and Dave Bradley once again for their time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees.